Welcome to the First Time Facilitator podcast. Whether you're a first-time facilitator or a seasoned pro, listen in for tips and tricks to make a bigger impact at the next workshop you deliver. And now, your host, she likes making lists, Leanne Hughes.
Hello and welcome to the show this week. I'm your host, Leanne Hughes, and I'm here to help you develop and deliver workshops that kill. Now, as facilitators, you may get a call or email from someone either in your team or externally, and they're calling you because they're either in a team or working with a team that's in conflict and may need a little bit of help. Now, ideally, in a perfect world, us facilitators would be working alongside newly formed teams and newly promoted managers and helping to set the scene, create a team vision, purpose and values, ways of working. But the reality is, we're actually usually called in when things are either starting to crack in a team environment or it's already highly dysfunctional. And it can be tricky trying to scramble together to figure out what you're going to do to help this team in crisis. And that's why I'm talking to today's guest. Her name is Steph Clarke. And if you've been listening to the show for quite a while, you would have heard me chat to her on episode 33. Now, Steph is a Pommy living in Melbourne, but she was up in Brisbane recently. So we caught up to talk life, business and books at a cafe before hopping into a studio to see what career pivots she's taken since our September conversation. One of the topics that Steph is really doubling down on is a concept or methodology called team coaching. So she recently undertook accreditation in team coaching, and it's a concept that's been in the UK for quite some time, but is relatively new here in Australia. And if you're listening in other parts of the world, I'd like to hear whether you've heard of it or not. So as a team coach and facilitator, Steph creates more meaningful moments in teams to help them meet their collective potential. She creates an environment for teams to have the conversations they need to have. And this involves going beyond the leadership retreat or the strategy day. And she works with the team in situ as they tackle the real work in real time. I'll let Steph further explain the concept of team coaching in this conversation. But first, if you'd like to join the conversation when the episode is over, join fellow first-time facilitators on my free Facebook group. It's called The Flip Chart. Just head on over to Facebook and search for that, or simply find the link in the show notes for this episode at firsttimefacilitator.com/episode 53. If you'd like to get a behind-the-scenes look at what I'm up to in my journey as a solopreneur, you can also find that on Instagram. My profile is at Leanne Hughes. Okay, now onto the show. Welcome back to the First Time Facilitator podcast, Steph Clarke.
Hi, Leanne.
Hi, great to have you in Brisbane.
Yes, I know. Doing a face-to-face in person.
Yeah, last time.
Pro, nice studio.
It is a really nice studio. Steph, I'd love you to tell the audience what you've been up to since we last had a conversation.
Yep. So since I was last on the podcast, I've been doing lots of facilitation, obviously, but also pivoting a lot more towards team transformation and team transformation activities. And a lot of that has really come down to helping teams have really great conversations with each other and to address some of the elephants in the room that sometimes as a facilitator, we freak out about. So what I've been doing is really building my practice of team coaching, which supplements facilitation really nicely.
Okay, so how do the two sort of work in together? What is the difference between team coaching and facilitation?
The way I like to put it is that with team coaching, you have to let the chaos reign, which I can see already in your face is something that makes you feel a bit sick.
And I'm sure a lot of listeners as well. Like, we want to just go in and it's a wonderful experience. Everyone gets along at the end of the day, with, high-fiving on the way out.
Yeah.
So talk to us about chaos and why it's important.
Yeah, the idea with team coaching is that you let the chaos reign to let the team almost go through the process of getting better together. And as a team coach, the idea is that you intervene in the right way. So you don't intervene to control necessarily, which I think as a facilitator is very natural to do because you want to maintain, get the right environment, all of those things. And those things are still important. But with team coaching, it's about helping them have the conversations they need to, which can get messy and can go places you're not entirely comfortable with, but you have to be okay with discomfort. It's that comfort with discomfort, which is just, to me, it's that step further than facilitation, because you, like I said, you don't always bring it back to that control place. And sometimes you want people to go away feeling a bit uncomfortable, because it means they're feeling something and it means something needs to change, and you can then use that to do something different.
The reason this conversation sort of started was Steph was in Perth attending this team coaching accreditation, and I think we're on, I don't know, WhatsApp or Messenger or one of 18 comms devices and apps I've got on my phone. But you were saying that over the course of the workshop, there was a bit of conflict, and my response was, "Oh, why didn't the facilitator, rein that in?" And this is where it all started.
Yeah.
So, what happened in that scenario when you were getting your accreditation?
Yeah, it was really interesting, and we were all laughing about it afterwards, because we were 5 pretty experienced facilitators, coaches, etc. And it's amazing that you put 5 people in a room to become a team and work on a project that really doesn't matter at the end of the day, but how much dysfunction then happens over 3 days of working together on something that doesn't matter. So what we all observed was the best and worst of each other and ourselves in a team scenario. And that was just hilarious in many ways, as you can probably imagine, but also fascinating around just that skill set of team coaching versus facilitation, and how the facilitator, if you want to call her that, or / the team coach who was leading the accreditation, when, where and how she chose to step in. And it was always with that coaching mindset of questioning rather than directing. It was very passive, but absolutely for the right outcome, because she would call us back to things. She would ask us how a conversation we've just had impacted, my role as on the team, or my role as a team member, or how, if we made a decision really quickly, she would just sort of, float in and ask the question of the group, "Okay, it seems like you've made a decision here. Did we hear all the voices? Or did you hear all the voices from the team to make that decision?" And we'd go, "Oh, no." So it was really intentional. And I think that's the thing, you're not on an agenda, which I think as a facilitator you normally are. And that was the really big difference, I think.
So these 5 people have come in. You're thinking, what was your intention going in? Did you think it would be this sort of, or you said, I'm going to learn about this team coaching module, but this was actually a kind of action learning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And like you said, you're all facilitators anyway, so I would expect there's a high level of emotional intelligence.
Yep, you would have thought so. No, we all are very high EQ, I'm sure, in all of us.
What created the conflict? Was it more about, someone is taking over here, I don't agree with that decision? And usually in an organisational setting or a team setting, I'll pick the battle, so that's all right. But when someone actually asks the question, did you agree with it? You've given the opportunity to finally speak up.
Yeah, absolutely. So exactly, and we saw a bit of that where we'd made a decision, or we thought we'd made a decision. A question was asked by whoever because we took turns to be the team coach as part of the accreditation. Whoever it was asked that question, we realised actually there is a fundamental issue with what we've just decided based on the input of someone who we haven't heard. And it was you just had that realisation, this happens in teams all the time. And what I really love about team coaching, and obviously then been practicing it and using those skills both in formal team coaching but in actually my facilitation as well, is just coming back to that and realising this happens all the time. And what you're really doing as a team coach is giving teams a vocabulary, giving them the language to use to have some of those conversations, to call some of those things, but also massively the awareness that that's even happening. Because one of the challenges I've seen a lot over many years of facilitating and running team days and those kind of things is you're having the same damn conversations with these teams year in, year out. Because nothing really changes when they go back to the office, they come away from the retreat, all the kind of fuzziness wears off. They've built their bridges or whatever it is that they've done.
Marshmallow spaghetti bridge.
Marshmallow spaghettis. And real life continues, and the same habits and things you fall back into. So one of the really powerful things as a team coach is you work with the team in situ. You work with them. You might go and do the offsite and the retreat as well, and that's usually a very good place to start. But then you go in and you're there in their face, when they're doing their real work, having their real meetings, to call some of those things and to have some of those conversations and to help them, which is the idea is that you kind of want to make yourself redundant so that they are doing that themselves. But you're there like, I thought, not I thought because it's a bit too judgy, but that's your inside voice. But you say things like, what was agreed? How did we agree, or how did you agree as a team that you were going to deal with these situations when you were at the retreat? Is that code of conduct or whatever you've come up with, or are those principles, how do they work in this situation?
Really good questions. Do they talk much about group dynamics, particularly when you've got someone that's really dominant versus someone that is a bit of an introvert, takes a bit more time to really consider things before they speak? Do they talk about, I guess, the different personalities or behaviours that you'd see play out?
Yep, absolutely. And that's a really big part of usually in the framework that I've kind of developed for using team coaching with teams. That's always one of the first things around, what's the purpose of the team? What is the work that we're doing together and only we can do? And how are we greater than the sum of our parts, which is really important. And then you start to dig into who's in the team and what are the styles and how do we usually make decisions and how should we make decisions and all of those things and the dynamics that come out. And really, as a team coach, you're there to coach the team as a unit, not the team as a group of individuals, which is quite a different mindset and skill set.
Yeah, and I'm thinking just back on purpose because I'm now on my own, but let's talk about like last week, we're working in a company. I think even that first question about purpose, if I was to go to certain teams within the organisation and said, question what is the purpose of the team, I don't know if I'd get the same answer from everyone or the team.
Yeah.
So, how do you even define purpose? How long does that stage take alone?
Oh, that can be a half a day conversation or a day of conversation around. And it depends on obviously the stage of the team and the maturity of the organisation and all of those kind of context things. But the other really important point of team coaching, which links to the questions you've asked, is this idea that the team is a system. It's kind of this living, breathing organism that doesn't just exist on its own. It's within it's within an organisation. It's got an ecosystem around it. It's got, memes and rituals and things of that organisation and of the team themselves. So you've got all of these things you need to bring into play so that it's real and so that it can be used in real life. Because the problem is often in team building and all the rest and team facilitation, team days, it's in isolation. It's the team on its own, rather than the team within its normal habitat.
And it's usually when you get back into the habitat, like it's easy to have a high-performing team if you're the only people. It's like it's
Absolutely.
Easy to run a business if there were no customers, but it's like that's the whole point. It's like how then do you collaborate and share? And
yeah. So when I do the purpose workshops with teams, and there's always an element of bespokeness depending on the context, but it is coming back to, why do we exist? Who are we serving? Who are our clients, our customers? What's important to them? How do we contribute to the bigger ecosystem of, whatever the organisation is that we sit in? And why does that matter? And then you do some individual stuff around, well, what motivates you to bring that purpose to life? Because it might be quite different for the different people. But even understanding that helps the team get stronger because they're going, oh, okay, cool, we've got these strengths. And here we go, you're like this bit, these strengths, these strengths in this area, these strengths in those areas. So we can actually pull together, but with the same goal and the same objective and the same purpose.
Yeah, like what drives us? Why are we here? What's the point of this department? So I think at the beginning of this, we talked about your experience and how you sort of went into conflict. Mm-hmm. And we like to think with team coaching that when a new team is formed, they'll get Steph in and she'll help guide them so you don't you're not an intervention kind of person. But in reality, and I guess we hear this from people even in the Flip Chart Facebook group, they're like, right, I've been called in because my team is in conflict. So you're not getting called in to prevent it. You're being called in to help find a solution. So teams come to you and go, right, two people in this team don't get along. What do we do? What can we do as facilitators?
It's a really good question. I think it always comes back to asking that next question of, well, how is that playing out and why is that happening? Because is this a style thing? It's just two different people who can't see eye to eye, or actually are they even having the right conversation? So sometimes it is facilitating that conversation to find out where is the greatest tension in this team. And I did that a couple of years ago now with more of a department. So I say team, but it's like 45 people, so it's not really a team, it's a department. And we did one of the 360 kind of profiling things. And we got everyone to stand in their different areas where they were. And what was really fascinating is that on the normal line of tension that you normally get in this particular tool, so people in this sort of top right corner will conflict more with these people in the bottom left corner and vice versa on the other diagonal. And I asked the team, I said, right, so we've got everyone stood in the room, around the room in their different corners. Where is the greatest tension in this team? Is it, because normally people go, oh, it's on these diagonals. And they said, oh, it's at the top, between the top right and the top left. And I said, oh, that's fascinating. Because what you then, when you overlaid who was in those different corners, you had all of the senior leaders of the team in this top right corner who are more affiliated to action and getting things done and moving things forward. On the flip side, in the top left corner, you had the more sort of junior to the middle manager level who are all in the detail doing the work, and their affiliation is to detail and deep kind of analysis and analytical thinking. So the two were just clashing, because these people over here were wondering why the work's not getting done and needing action. And these other people over here were wondering why they're being pushed so much and just wanting to get on and get into the detail and get too detailed, probably. So it's just fascinating to see where tension happens, why it happens, and start to uncover the real reason without responding. And I think the biggest thing is not to respond to the ask, or to the assumption that it is being caused by one thing and not another thing. Because sometimes what we'll see in the response and what you'll be asked, and I find this often, people often come and say, less so around this person and that person, but more around the thing I hear the most from teams and team leaders is no one holds each other accountable.
I've heard that too, many times. Yeah. So I think I've even said it. Probably,
yeah. We probably all have. To me, I generally find that the accountability isn't the problem. The problem is the team is not having the conversation about what I will hold myself accountable to. Because it's really, you can't hold another person accountable. Like, it's just impossible. So why are we not having a conversation? Because normally when people say, we need to be able to hold each other accountable, what people really mean is we need to know who to blame when something goes wrong. And that's not a great way of having a team, just waiting to see who we're going to blame. So if we change the conversation around accountability and focus on, well, how do we have the right conversation around so people are really committing to something they can truly commit to and want to commit to and even feasibly can commit to, from workload and skills and all of those kind of things. Like, that's the conversation the team needs to be having, not one of accountability.
Yeah.
And then it's a case of what I will hold myself accountable to and what support I need from others to do that.
Yeah, not like, this is, Steph, you're going to be accountable for this. If you don't do it, here are the consequences.
Yeah, exactly.
And we think that's going to motivate behaviour and create a really high-functioning team. Mm-hmm. When you say it in those words, it sounds really obvious. But, yeah, I mean, it's very prevalent. A lot of companies have accountability as one of their sort of underlying principles, and it's a shame how that's playing out. And so with these discussions where you have people on the top right and the top left and they're like, oh, wow, this is like a watershed moment. Now I understand why there's tension. What do you do then? So you talk about why people are motivated differently, and then is it then valuing okay, well, you got detail, which is great because then you make sure that whatever product we're rolling out will be successful because you've thought about it. Is it seeing the value in each other's, I guess, ways of behaving?
Normally I just mic drop and leave at that point because they've had their realisation. I can go now. No. So it's absolutely that. And I think sometimes, and I often do question the validity sometimes of these kind of horoscope, 360s and things like that. But that said, it does create a good conversation around awareness, around differences, around how to value those differences. So yeah, absolutely. And again, coming back to the original point, or one of the earlier points, about giving teams the vocabulary. Giving teams the vocabulary to go, you're this style, or you have these preferences, or this is what motivates you. I can now use that language because it is now, I know it and I understand it and I know that's important to you. Whereas previously that's not something that was in my psyche and in my everyday vocabulary to use and to discuss with people. So I think for me, a lot of this comes down to expanding the kind of available vocabulary and awareness of people in your team and about your team.
Yeah, rather than they just slow everything down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's the vocab, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about just this whole thing of team coaching. And Steph, you've said to me one of your strengths is being able to be honest with people, and you don't really sort of shy away from giving feedback and that kind of thing. So this sounds like a perfect role for you. If you're a facilitator who doesn't really like the confrontation, can you see this still sort of working for that type of person? when you're creating uncomfortable moments?
Yes and no. I think it's something that you can learn, you can become more comfortable with, and you can ease yourself into and become more comfortable with discomfort. I think going straight into it, you're probably going to do yourself a disservice and your client if you're going straight into this kind of thing and that's not your comfort level, because it is pretty confronting, and you've got to be okay with creating discomfort in people. I know from talking to the person who was running the accreditation, she was saying, because it's actually team coaching in its kind of truest form, if you want to use kind of that, is not very well known or very mature as an industry in Australia. So it's really, it is coming off of really great stuff happening in the UK and the US in particular, and to an extent Canada, and some amazing thought leadership and psychology and behavioural science around teams. So the work of Peter Hawkins and some of the others in that field. So what you've got to try and do is create some of those areas, even in facilitation. And when you're doing, facilitation as opposed to training, facilitation gives you ability to create a little bit of that. And it might just be if you're facilitating a workshop on presentation skills, for example, making people feel a bit uncomfortable by filming them. Now, they might be horrified. They're probably going to be horrified. You might be a little bit horrified that you've made them horrified. But again, just kind of building up your, what's the word I'm looking for? Your kind of ability to make others uncomfortable. But again, not for the sake of it.
Yeah, this isn't a power trip.
Yeah, this is
to get
exactly
the best result, right?
Absolutely. Oh, that was it. And I was going to say the person who did the accreditation, she was saying that, probably they've probably had maybe a couple of hundred people in the whole of Australia go through this accreditation. Probably 30 to 40% of them haven't really done anything with it because it was actually too confronting. And they were facilitators and they were coaches in the kind of one-on-one space. And that's great. And they sort of did this and went, actually, no, this is not something I'm comfortable with creating in a team environment and being able to hold, because you've got to be able to hold it.
Yeah. Asking the question just from my own personal point of view, because I don't know if I'd be the right person either, because I'd want to break the tension with a stupid joke because I would be really uncomfortable. So that's interesting.
You can still do that too. I do that too. Sometimes
that's what you need to do.
Yeah. Because it's to what end? And it's not just gratuitous discomfort. It's not about making people feel uncomfortable for the sake of it and to just give yourself some kind of weird power trip. It is to get the right outcome so the team have the right conversation, which might not be one they're comfortable in having, but it's going to help them because it's where they need to go and and the stuff you do up front with the team around, are you committed to this? Because you don't just go in and cold and do this with the team. They have to be fully on board with this process, because it's not just a half-day workshop. You're working with them probably for 3, 6, 9, 12 months to help them get to where they want to be and to true high performance, which if you look at sports teams and all the normal kind of analogies we use with high performing teams, these are the kind of things they're doing.
So do you find that that chestnut of a model, so Tuckman's model that we see still around, is that kind of playing out through this as well? Is it sort of the whole forming?
Yes. Yep. So there's in the team coaching space, there's almost an advanced version of that, but it's essentially a similar kind of model, but some different language and some different phases within it.
Yeah, cool. And how have you sort of applied this in your day job or in your consulting? Have you seen sort of results, interesting things come out as a result of you bringing in this learning that you've got now? Yeah,
to an extent. So I'm still working, I'm still in the early stages with some clients of doing this. We've not got to the point of being able to go, right, and 12 months, over the 12 months we've done this. But one team I worked with quite recently, it was more of a leadership team. We had a shorter workshop, so it wasn't true team coaching, but I applied, and that's the great thing about it. It's another tool in the toolkit. You don't just, it's not just a hammer, and everything looks like a nail, but you do use it with the other, facilitation tools that you've got. So I used some team coaching style questions with this team end of last year, and what was really interesting, so we'd had a couple of hours of workshop. Conversation got fairly heated. It was good. It was productive. There was some really honest conversation as part of that, and everyone was getting quite frustrated at this particular point. So I decided we'd stop for a break because everyone just needed clearly to just decompress slightly. Stopped for a break. Everyone went away. What I observed during that break was all these side conversations were happening. Oh, did you hear what so-and-so said? Oh, did you see this? And oh, God, I can't believe they said that. anyway, I thought that was really fascinating. So when they all came back, I said, I could see from the conversation before, you're all really honest with each other. And they're like, yeah, really honest with each other. We tell each other how it is. I said, that's really interesting, because what I then observed was you all went and had side conversations about what you'd heard but what you hadn't said in the room. So you really, how does that make you feel around are you really that honest with each other? And there was just this moment where they said, oh yeah, no, actually we don't say what we really think to each other. And I think it's just because sometimes they're loud, they think they're being honest.
Yeah. Isn't that funny how the break just informed that? Because you could have been a facilitator that was like, right, I need a break too. I'm getting out of here. I'm going to get a coffee. But you were sort of loitering around, lurking.
I was getting a coffee too.
Yeah. But it really did inform you when you came back.
Absolutely.
And that would have been a really, really strong, powerful moment, I imagine.
It was, yeah. And it was this amazing... And again, there was no agenda for that. That wasn't one of my points to bring up. It just happened. And that's one of the things around, good facilitation, but also team coaching is noticing the dynamics, noticing what's happening, the unsaid, all of those kind of different things that you then inform you to ask a question.
Yeah, nice. And so
the hard thing is staying non-judgmental.
It would be, yeah. And even when you said before, I think, you said that is you're actually sort of judging within that statement.
Yeah,
so wow, you could be really.
You have, the formation of the questions is really important, and that's something that I slip up on often. So you have to kind of really catch yourself and teach yourself to use different language. And again, the other thing I find really hard is not saying we, because I'm in the room with them, but it's you, it's your team, this is you. Whereas as a facilitator, I'm very much more like, no, we're all in this together.
Yeah, interesting little shifts here. It'll be great to sort of find out in about 12 months' time, or when you finish working with teams, what the results have been, what have you learnt again? Episode number 3 with you. Right. I want to quickly switch to visual facilitation. So on my Instagram page, I uploaded an image and LinkedIn. Steph sent through this really cool design of the episode I did on the 7 attributes of superhero facilitators. Because you'd just been at was it Bicabo?
Bicabo, yeah.
Workshop. And we also went to a podcasting conference, and you were drawing up all this cool stuff. Talk to us about visual facilitation. Why do you love it?
I love it because it blows people's minds.
It does.
And I love the idea that, there's all this stuff around, death by PowerPoint and all the rest. Now, that's a whole different, and you've had a whole other episode on that. It's not PowerPoint that's the problem, it's the way it's used. But if you can run a workshop for a day or half a day or even a couple of hours with no slides and just some flip charts and just some visuals, people lose their minds.
Doesn't feel like training.
No, it doesn't. And I did this, I ran a workshop on influence skills back end of last year. And these people walked in the room, and there was no tables in the room. I had all the just chairs all in a kind of big squiggly pile around the room. And they were like, well, where do we face? I was like, just here's fine. And they're like, but where's the screen going to be? I was like, my friends, there is no screen. They're like, but where are you going to put the PowerPoint?
Oh, bless.
And they just could not get over this. Is like the first time. These are, were relatively senior people. They weren't, grads or anything. And they'd just never seen training done in that way. So the engagement we had was fantastic. And I just looked around the room, probably about, 1:30 in the afternoon. I looked around the room, there was chairs everywhere, there was pens all over the floor, there was flip charts all over the place, Post-it notes stuck on stuff. And I just thought, this is learning. This is learning, not people sat dribbling, looking at a PowerPoint presentation. And there's a time and place for PowerPoint, and I use it and whatever, but...
We don't need PowerPoint disclaimers here.
No, thanks. But it was just that moment of going, this is so much more powerful, because we're actually... And again, you've got to design the session around it. You can't just use it instead of and just type, write on all the text that you would put on a slide.
And you'll hand out the work,
exactly.
The notes and printouts.
Exactly. Yeah. So you've got to use it in, again, the right way, as same with any other tool. But I just love the visual element of it. People are up taking photos of the stuff because they're like, this looks really cool. And they save it on they were like, we've got this wall in our office that we keep all our kind of notes to each other on. Like, can we take these and put them on that? It's just, it's then an artifact they're going to keep with them. And they're going to, kind of look back on that and go, oh yeah, I remember that. And even if they forget, again, 95% of what they learned during the session, that will be there as a visual reminder of some of the key points. So I just think it's fantastic. And so I try and practice it when I go to talks, when I go to events, and I go to, one of my favourite ones is Creative Mornings, which run all around the world, and about 190 cities I think they're in now. So I really love, and again, because it's that kind of thing as well as Creative Mornings, so of course you're going to draw it. I really love going to things and practicing that skill of capturing information, listening for the key points, and then doodling it and drawing it. And it's not artistic, it's not illustration, I'm certainly not in any way artistically talented, but anyone can kind of doodle, and the Picablo method is that anyone can draw. It's shapes.
Yeah. And what I really liked about the point you raised before was when you don't have a PowerPoint or rely on the slide deck, you actually have the freedom to do whatever you want with the room. Because usually it's really conventional. It's like, well, the tables and chairs must go here. Because of space, we can't let them. It's like, but if you've got a room where you're just like, there's no rules here, we don't need to be facing a particular direction. Yeah. That's fantastic.
And it's awesome because then you can break them out into pods and things like that. You can have conversation. It means you can just use the room in a really meaningful way. So you can, and what I did with that one and I've done with others, is you almost have like the thinking area in one room. So you actually bring the group around to different areas and be like, right, let's go over here. And you stand, like people will stand up and you'll walk over and you'll go and debrief something on one wall because you've put all the sticky notes up on there. And there's not tables you're falling over and stuff like that and trying to move around. And then you can stand, and cable. God, yeah, death by, never mind death by PowerPoint, it's death by cables. And then you can have like, the kind of talking area in another, kind of like a bit more of an open space at the back where you can go and have, do some different activities or move around, stand up, walk around, etc. So you get to really use the space in a really meaningful way, which, I know we've talked a lot about the book, The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. It's one of those kind of things to think about how are you gathering these people and how are you going to, what is the purpose and how are you going to use the space to create the meaning?
Yeah, brilliant. Now, you've also, you're a bit understated in the intro when I asked you what you've been up to since we last spoke, because you've actually brought out something really exciting that links into one of your favourite hobbies. Do you want to share that with our listeners?
Yes, I have validated my procrastination by starting a podcast about all the books that I read to waste time. So I've legitimised my hobby of reading. So last year in 2018, I read 30 books. And so I decided to scratch my own itch because I was reading all these books and some of the stuff was really sticking with me and I was using in workshops and recommending to people and sending them books and all of those kind of things. But I found that I really wanted a way of collating all the things I'd learned so I could then share it more easily with people and also refer back to, obviously, myself. So I created Steph's Business Bookshelf, the podcast, which is where I share the 3 big ideas that I take from the different books that I've read, and all of them are non-fiction. So it's called the Business Bookshelf. It's slightly more general non-fiction sometimes, but usually with a business theme or leadership type theme.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. And what's your job title?
Chief Bookworm. I'm Chief Bookworm at Steph's Business Bookshelf. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that the best idea about this is because I don't get the time to read. Or when I do, it's usually at the end of the day and I'm reading like 5 pages and falling asleep, which is, then I don't retain it. It takes me like a year to finish one book. I do have intentions of getting more books in this year, but the good thing about that is I can listen to your show and really decide, do I want to delve deeper on this book? Or, hey, I got the top 3 lessons. Let's try something else.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that I've heard most from people since I've launched is, listen to it. It was great because now I know it. Now I know I don't want to read that book, or now I know that I do want to invest the time in finding out more about those things because the intro I gave in the 3 big things was enough to whet their appetite.
Yeah, spark the curiosity.
Yeah.
Oh, Steph, it's been so good having you back on the First Time Facilitator podcast. And I love that, even since the short time in between episodes, you've picked up some new skills. You've started a podcast. You've really got to focus on really what you want, the team coaching area. Again, a foreign concept to me, and it'd be interesting to see if other listeners have heard about it, what they think about it, if they want to experience that discomfort. Where can people find you?
You can find me, obviously, on the podcast in all good podcast players where you'll find Leanne's podcast. You'll also find Steph's Business Bookshelf, so subscribe to that. Also on Instagram, which is Steph, STEPH _Clarke, CLARKE __. I know, so annoying with the underscores. Why do people keep taking my name? Anyway, and on LinkedIn, Steph Clarke. Just give me a search.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Steph.
Thanks, Leanne.
Thanks so much for tuning in to First Time Facilitator. If you liked the episode, please share it with your mates or subscribe to the podcast feed in iTunes. Till next time,